Hi everyone, my name's Claire. I'm from the Birchal team and I'm beaming in from Melbourne. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which I am presenting from, which is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'm incredibly excited today to be joined by not only the Rainforest Bounty team, but all of you who are tuning in today to learn more about their upcoming investment opportunity on Birchal. And Rainforest Bounty, Eddie and Geraldine, welcome to today's session, and I'll hand it to you guys to introduce yourself and tell investors about what they'll learn today.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Claire. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We're incredibly grateful that you showed interest in investing in our campaign. And I'll just pass it over to Geraldine.
Hi, I'm Geraldine, the founder and CEO of Rainforest Bounty. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Nudgee people, which is the country that we're on, which is the beautiful Atherton Tablelands, and the Nudgee country goes right across to the Wooroloomooloo National Park, which has Queensland's two highest mountains. So it's a really beautiful and spectacular part of the world.
So in today's webinar, everyone, we'll pass it over to the Rainforest Bounty team to run you through a bit of a pitch deck that they've put together for today to tell you a little bit more about their opportunity and the plans they have for the future of the business. We will be doing a Q&A at the end. So if you think of any questions coming through today's session, please use your Q&A chat bot down the bottom. Don't use the chat, please. Please use the Q&A section so we can go through your own questions as they come through. And we will do that, in about 15 or 20 minutes. So get your questions ready and I'll pass it over to the Rainforest Bounty team.
Awesome. So, like we were saying, my name's Eddie Nye. So I am the Director of Sales and Growth for Rainforest Bounty. My family has been in agriculture on the Atherton Tablelands for 6 generations. My daughters are the 7th. And what we really did was in cattle until I got to my dad's turn, and then he saw the massive amount of land clearing and destruction that went with that, and decided to opt out and got more into the conservation side of sort of land management, which has then put me on this pathway as a young 10-year-old planting orchards at our home property. Going down the path of why regenerative ag and conservation and agriculture is really important to the land and to the country. So I'm also very passionate about food and beverage innovation. I'm a bit of an FMCG nerd. I sort of walk around supermarkets spending an hour just reading the labels of things for fun. And for me, as a millennial and as this kind of what drives me around the passion of native fruit is that I really see it as an emerging part of the Australian burgeoning food culture, and how this is now developing a big part of our cultural identity. And every good culture has a great food culture. So I see, for me, that native fruit had such a big impact and of where that's leading to. And then also I'm a really sort of strong supporter of First Nations involvement. I was really fortunate to grow up in North Queensland, and my dad was a park ranger, so I spent a lot of my youth in Indigenous communities. So I was sort of, from a very early age, I got to see why and develop a real sort of understanding of First Nations culture and why native foods and this kind of agriculture is super important to them.
Thanks, Eddie. So as I said before, my name is Geraldine Maguire. I have a PhD in plant genetics, and I was also very fortunate to grow up in this part of the world. And as a kid, I was a bit of a geek, probably quite a geek actually. I spent a lot of my time wandering around in the rainforest. It's really fortunate that my parents had some land up here on the Atherton Tablelands, which had some beautiful forest on it, some beautiful waterfalls and creeks. And back in those days, there wasn't a lot written down about the native fruits. And there was a couple that were quite well known to the women in the Country Women's Association that made jams and cordials, but mostly it was pretty unknown. So I spent a lot of time researching and investigating those things. And really that led me into my career as a scientist. And I was really the first person in my family ever to go to university. My mum left school at 14 and my dad left school at 15. So it was quite a big leap for our family for me to head off to university. But really was, passionate about science and started off in agricultural science, and then moved into doing landscape restoration in the mining industry and became a really passionate environmentalist. Got a job in Indonesia. By this stage, I had fortunate enough to meet Eddie's dad and to marry him, and Eddie and his brother came as a package deal. So off we all went to Indonesia when they were quite small boys, and lived there, and really I think connected seeing what was going on in the world with back to the upbringing that I'd had as a young child in far north Queensland. So that probably leads us into why Rainforest Bounty, and it really touches on what I saw in Indonesia, which I used to catch a helicopter to work in the morning, and it's about an hour and a half into the site. And over the 5 years that we were there, I saw this incredible destruction of the rainforest. It was really disheartening and alarming. And, it really deeply affected me to witness that firsthand. And so when we eventually moved back to Australia, what it did was give me, I guess, fresh eyes. And I looked at the country around where we were on the Atherton Tablelands and realised that exactly the same thing had happened here, but 100 years previously, so that the scars had healed, and what had been destroyed rainforests were now paddocks of cows, but essentially it was really destruction of rainforest. And so, that whole philosophy about, think global but act local. I said to my husband, what can we do here? And he had bought an abandoned dairy farm sometime before we left for Indonesia, and it was really just a prickle farm by the time we came back. So we started with our own property. We started clearing the weeds and replanting native rainforest species. First for restoration and biodiversity, and then we thought, well, how can we get more people involved in this? Because really, you can't save the world just one person, but if you get more and more people involved, you can really create a movement. So by that stage, I kind of went back to thinking about the fruits that I'd learnt about as a young person, and started to trial lots of different types of edible species, and we planted all of those around our where we now live. And lo and behold, we started getting castor trees back on our property. So it was this real journey towards, being biodiversity being our main driver, learning about the fruits and getting those fruits, back into regenerative farming systems. We didn't even have words for them in those days, but now what we call these polycultures are regenerative farming systems. And not only are they regenerating the forest, but what we now know through the work that we've done is they're also regenerating the soil. And that's a really big part for us, and the driver with what we do is that we're regenerating the soil biology and the soil biota, and it's through that we can start to reverse some of these trends that industrial agriculture has had, and its impact on not only the environment but on people and people's health. And I saw that in my own family. My dad died of Parkinson's. My husband now has an autoimmune disease. And a lot of that is to do with lots of impacts of industrial agriculture and use of chemicals as young people. So there's a number of things that drive me into why we started Rainforest Bounty and what we're trying to achieve through that progress of Rainforest Bounty. What Eddie and I have found over the years is that people who are interested in our company are really interested in this part about the carbon and how we sequestering carbon and how we capturing carbon into our soils. And so we've started actually doing a lot of research. All of our farms and our growers, we measure the soil carbon, which is measured through the percentage of organic matter. And we've been able to map the huge change that's had over the years through growing these regenerative farming systems.
Arguably, climate change is the greatest threat to humankind facing us at the moment. And I think most of us are pretty aware of the pretty startling statistics and timeframes that we're facing. So, and the entire food chain is about 25% of the global emissions. So I think it's up to us as a business to be a business for purpose and to try and enact small incremental changes that will ultimately have a really big impact. And that's, for me, a massive driver of doing what we do, because we can actually see and measure the impact that we're a small repeatable and scalable, and there is a lot of people, whether it's native fruit, but whether it's avocados and all sorts of other types of agriculture, can sort of start in reduction on that scale on the global emissions that it causes from food. So, and that's definitely the why. So us as a business, so the company currently gets its revenue from three main revenue streams. So we're an ingredient supplier, so we supply restaurants, we supply other food manufacturers, and now we're starting to move into being supplying multinational kind of blue chip organizations. So there's been decades and decades of research in native ingredients, which is now, as the industry is starting to catch up, we're able to now start looking at supplying over the next 10 years, 100 plus tons of one type of fruit, for example, to just one customer. And that's at a minimum. So that side of the business is quite good. It's quite a sort of profitable part of the business. And the next side of the business is the value-added product. So Rainforest Bounty has been trading since July 2020. But Geraldine has spent 20 years developing plant genetics and the R&D business. Ray had a line of legacy products, which we've now taken on. So that's sauces, condiments, syrups, and kind of retail products that are really targeted towards the cans tourism market. And back before COVID, when Cairns was getting 2.6 million visitors a year, supplying that market was a good sort of business model. But since COVID, we've had to rethink how we actually target a new demographic. So we've launched kombuchas. We've got a line of Asian-inspired meal bases using native fruit and champion native fruit. That we're in development currently, and that we can actually have national and export. Awesome.
Okay, so Eddie talked a little bit before about how we keep innovating, and I think that's really the story of our business. And that was from learnings, really looking at how this industry started here. So it was really started as a wild harvest industry around about 35 years ago. The two most common fruits were the lemon aspen and the Ure plum, or the Davidson plum, you might know it as. and those were harvested by people living locally, and often usually those things were sent away down to Sydney and Melbourne. There's a couple of large manufacturers back in the day, and often people didn't get paid for a very long time, and often what they did get paid was a very small amount of money. So eventually that wild harvest industry collapsed, which is probably a good thing, because people were getting quite destructive in how they're actually harvesting the trees to get those fruits. So with lemon aspen, they would literally just go along and chop down branches or chop down a tree to get the fruit. So it was not a really sustainable way to grow those fruits. So when I got involved, there was a small group of us who were really interested in actually growing these fruits, and nobody had ever done that before. And people say, oh, why is this uncertainty, and why can't you tell us, exactly like an avocado, what the yield's going to be by when? And I say, we're at a stage with these fruits where we were with the lemon 700 years ago. So we're really domesticating species that have never been domesticated before. But our goal has always been to do them in these regenerative systems, because that's what I had seen work through doing landscape regeneration. And now we have the science that demonstrates that that's actually the right way to rebuild soil health at the same time. So by having that science background, it's given me the right guidance to create first the planting systems, but then also, what are the products that should be coming from this? And my first product I created is actually, I think it's still our bestseller, which is our spicy plum sauce made with the Uro plum. And I made that for my dad for his 70th birthday. We had a big surprise party for him. And it actually took me 4 years to get the recipe right, because I could only access small amounts of fruit in those days. And each year I would tweak the recipe. And anyway, so I think I tweaked it and got it just right on this occasion. And people went literally crazy for it. So like I knew I was really onto something with that sauce. And from there, it was really taking it to markets, getting feedback from people about what other products they're interested in. And so we really started with, I think, what I would call the low risk products, so sauces, chutneys, jams, and then we branched into vinegars, which I saw this trend in the fruit vinegars, which is people really enjoyed those. And then when Eddie came on board, he said, you need to diversify, you need to get into curry bases. And so then we created a range of curry bases. And then with this big trend in gut health, what we saw is the real need to get a really good quality kombucha on the market. So our kombucha is raw kombucha, which means it has live cultures in it, which means it needs to be kept refrigerated. It has a 6-month best by date, but you really need to treat it as though it's a dairy product. And it's only through that you get the live cultures and the real true gut health effect. So yeah, I become a bit of a kombucha snob in the process of doing this. And we're constantly looking at what's happening in the market, what are people interested in, but at the same time, the work that my part in the business has been through my experience as a plant geneticist to be selecting superior genetics. A really good example is the Bunji tamarind. In the wild, that tree only fruits about every 6 or 7 years. And when I first came across these trees, actually on my parents' farm, and collected the seed, it took 7 years for those seedlings to actually produce flowers and fruit. But each year we've identified the best trees, we've selected those, we've grown them, and now our new growers, and we have around about 10 to 15 new growers, they're getting their trees flowering within 2.5 years. So it's actually, they're coming on a lot quicker, they're a lot healthier. So through the work that we've been doing, we've actually domesticated these species over that the last 20 years of effort. And we've done the same for each of the different species that we work with. We're always looking for superior lines, superior genetics, because there is actually so much diversity out there naturally within the forests. And we love that, and we want to keep that. We're not in a big rush to go down to some kind of, clonal tissue cultured plant system. What we do want is to keep that diversity so that we're building our soil health at the same time, as well as giving ourselves more certainty in the commercialisation of those species.
Yeah, and then I think another thing, just going back to the product, is that since COVID, we really had to try and get a real understanding of who our customer was and who our sort of key target market was. So we realised that more plant-based, urban millennials kind of, and within those sort of the age brackets surrounding that, are really into our products. They're great advocates for our products. So just refining a few of our product lines to sort of match that demographic, and working on sort of other ways of accessing those markets. Also, being a vertically integrated business gives us a massive advantage in terms of the biggest issue with really any food and beverage business is supply, but particularly around the native fruit industry is the supply that is needed. And where there's sort of variables such as bushfires in New South Wales or droughts, because there is such a sort of, compared to other things, a small amount of supply, it can have a massive impact on the entire industry. So for us, it's about supply chain security and creating and making sure that we have our own supply for our products. And also it really helps us just with further development of products and gives us those kinds of advantages. And like I said, Geraldine has had 20 years of experience with the plants. Geraldine's also the chair of ANFAB, which is the Australian Native Foods and Botanicals Board. So really we have a finger on the pulse of the industry and continually looking at the market overall. So the use of the fund. So what we'll be doing, what we aim to do is to plant more trees. That's our number one goal in this fundraise, is to plant more trees. If we're successful in raising the full 1.5 million, that'll allow us to plant 34 acres, or roughly around 15,000 trees, and be able to produce just about 55 tonnes of lemon aspen. It's one of the fruits which we have a key which we have a key demand for, and we'll be able to produce on average about 140 tonnes all up of native fruit. And then what we're aiming to do is, through key partnerships with First Nations organisations, is them to supply the additional 50% that we need. It's also product development. We need to then look at how we can get our products out to a broader market. Currently in the format that they're in now, which is great for the local market, and we have, like I said, a huge amount of local advocates, but we need to be able to get these on the shelves of the larger retailers. So there's a little bit of just adjusting recipes, adjusting packaging, and then finding third-party manufacturers who we can partner with to really be able to scale that when rapidly. Also, the infrastructure that's needed that is associated with agriculture on this scale, so sheds, roads, irrigations, all those kind of things. So that's really key to success for when we're doing this at the full 34 acres. And then, of course, sales and marketing. We can have a great product, we can have a great amount of supply, but we really need to be able to get this in front of the right people, and keep that kind of the brand and the products at the forefront of people's minds. So this is this is really the next step for us as a business.
So we talk about why Birchal. We noticed a couple of other businesses that were starting to use Birchal. And this is a journey that Eddie and I have been on for some time. We've been kind of growing our grower base through regional growers, and we'd also been in consultation for the last couple of years with Indigenous groups so that we could share that knowledge that we had around the regenerative farming systems and also around the commercialisation of those species, but still having a really respectful relationship. And that comes from, you know, the background that my husband and I have had growing up here in North Queensland. We're very much involved and have many friends from the Indigenous community here, and yet we saw that Indigenous communities weren't being afforded the opportunity to participate there was just many barriers to Indigenous groups to participate. So for us, Birchal really was that platform for ethical and socially aware investors, with the other kind of crowdfunding that they've done as well. So that's what, you know, why we chose them and why we're speaking to people like you today, because we figure that we have very similar values and we're trying to achieve the same things in life.
And why raise capital now? So we spent 20 years as a family, you know, getting these trees to where they are. We have an understanding of the brand, we have an understanding of the market. But for us to achieve what we need a capital boost, essentially. I heard a statistic the other day that with capital raising, a company it gets a company 10 years closer to its goals compared to not raising money. So, you know, we need to expand our orchards. We have a lot of demand for fruit. The industry itself is stifled by the amount of supply. And then also we need to scale our products and get them to a national export distribution level. So thank you very much. Really appreciate you listening to us today and your expression of interest. So really welcome any questions.
I'm muted, classic, probably the best way I can be. Guys, that was a really great presentation and really interesting to learn a little bit more about Rainforest Bounty. I didn't even know the backstory of how it started, which I think is just fantastic to hear about all the work and the research that's gone into your orchids, plantations and your product development. For anyone who's got a question, please pop it in the Q&A down the bottom. I see someone's got their hand up, so if someone would like to ask a question vocally, you're very welcome to, but otherwise yeah, if you would like to type them in, we can do that first. So, and as well, before we hop into questions as well, because we get a lot of questions through Birchal about, you know, offer terms, seeing the details, valuation of companies, share price, future projections and everything like that, letting all potential investors know that there will be what's called a regulated crowdsource funding offer document, which will be made available at the time that the investment opportunity is open. This document will have details all about the Rainforest Bounty backstory, company structure, the last 12 months of completed financial statements, share price, existing shareholders, rights associated with your shares, and all that sort of information. One of the quirks about the crowdsource funding regime that we operate under, though, however, is that you can't include prospective financial information in these documents, unlike you might expect in another sort of investment opportunity, because ASIC considers those details to be speculative. But any other information you'll be able to find in the offer document. And I know that the Rainforest Bounty team will be more than happy to answer any questions that anyone's got, either on this webinar or offline through a phone call. But just with that sort of initial groundwork laid about all those nitty-gritty questions that people, you know, want to ask, I'll hop into the first question that we've got, which is, great product and idea, how will fruit picking and processing labour be sourced?
Yeah, sorry, can you say that again?
No worries. The questions come through saying, great product and idea, how will fruit picking and processing labour be sourced?
Yeah, so currently we're really proud that we hire local people and that we can offer sort of long-term opportunities to people. The Atherton Tablelands, as so many other rural areas, has a really high youth unemployment due to the fact that there is probably a lack of opportunity compared to other areas. So something we're really proud of is hiring local people and helping them sort of develop through it. once we're at a scale of 15,000 trees producing, we'll probably look to hire in seasonal workers, backpackers, or other kind of agricultural visa people on agricultural visas, just because it is a very efficient way of knocking things out. But I think something we will always maintain to do is to skill and employ local people.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, and I might just say, Claire, that where we live, there's a really big avocado and blueberry industry and mango industry, and they're really well set up for seasonal workers. And even during COVID, there's been really big programs in place to be able to get seasonal workers from the Pacific Islands to participate in those programs. So that's been maintained all the way through. One of my best friends, who is the workforce development officer for the Department of Ag here, so part of her job is to make sure that everybody's got enough workers. So I think we're fortunate to live where we live because it's such a beautiful place and people want to come here and to work. But yeah, as Eddie said, locals first is always our employment strategy, and particularly Indigenous people is our first priority. We're actually in the process of developing a RAP, a Reconciliation Action Program for Rainforest Bounty, and that details all things like preferential employment for Indigenous people. So that's really the basis of where we want to be. But then if we exhaust that supply of people, we'll then move to seasonal workers.
Yeah, fantastic. Another question that's come through in terms of supply, working and getting the fruit out there. A question's come through saying, what proportion of fruit supply is owned versus supplied in the Rainforest Bounty supply chain? Of the other 10 to 15 growers that you mentioned in your presentation, are they also looking to expand, to your knowledge?
Yeah, so currently our supply that from our own farms, it is really determined on a fruit by fruit basis. So something like the Bunji tamarind is about 80% from our own supply. Lemon aspen is something like 70%, whereas the Davidson plum, most of that we're buying in from our other growers. So what we're aiming to do is to flip that. And look, our other growers, we've brought them on board because they really share the ethos and the ethics behind Rainforest Bounty. They're not looking to grow their businesses to the scale that we're looking to grow it to. So for us currently, we're buying in most of our fruit from people in our network. But then very quickly we will start outgrowing that and be able to, most of the supply will come from our own farms.
Yeah, fantastic. Will you be seeking organic certification?
We're not seeking organic certification currently, but there has been conversation about, there's regenerative ag certification that's happening in the United States. There's all these other kind of certifications that we will be looking into.
Can I talk to that? Yeah, I think where we're at is that the regenerative farming system has almost surpassed the organic certification. So the understanding around organic certification is it's good for the consumer for organic certification, and it's good for the farmer because they're not handling chemicals. But regenerative agriculture is not just good for you, it's also good for the planet. So it's actually a whole nother level of complexity, and the certification system to be identified as a regenerative farmer is still being sorted out, and the indicators are still being sorted out, and really where it's tracking back to is soil carbon and soil organic matter, so that you can demonstrate that because if you're using lots of nasty chemicals, you're not building soil carbon and soil health. So it's the whole industry has moved into this regenerative system, and then how do we certify that regenerative system is the question that is currently being asked.
Yeah, they're currently trialing a certification system over in the United States where regenerative ag is now taking off in a big way, and that is regenerative agriculture organic certification. So
is there a way to track the carbon stored in the soil at the moment?
Yeah, so we do that through the soil tests that we do, and it's really tracked through, it's called the percentage of organic matter, And so we know through the tests that we've done on all of our farms and the data that we now have is that our farms start off here around about 6% organic matter, which is actually quite high for the rest of Australia. The rest of Australia is anywhere between 1% and 2%. And then with our orchards that are 25 years old, the organic matter has raised up to 12%. Wow. So it doesn't do it quickly, but it's doubled over that time period, which is then its ability to sequester carbon is demonstrated through that percentage of organic matter. And organic matter is calculated as a percentage of carbon that's in the soil.
Yeah, wow, incredible.
So yeah, it's some good indicators now that we can use.
Yeah, to show that, you know, the way that you're farming and producing these fruits is actually working in terms of, you know, returning health to that soil. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And fingers crossed we can get more orchards planted to continue that work. Someone's asking around the money side of things. One question's come through about applying for state or federal grants. I believe this investor is actually based in Western Australia, and I believe that there's similar grants that happen over there for these sort of projects. What's your dealing or your history with grants and sort of accessing federal assistance?
Well, just quickly, any grant that comes available that we're able to access, we apply for. And that's just us as a business. I think, you know, the business basics grant we just received, and then sort of any other stuff we're looking at. We're always keeping an eye on the grants, but then Geraldine has been working on some sort of much bigger ones to do with our Indigenous partnerships.
Yeah, so there's a few grants we've received over the years. One, we received a grant to actually do some studies on the nutritional analysis of 2 of our fruits because there was just nothing available. So we did that grant in partnership with the University of Queensland. The work that we're doing on the soil health, we're actually doing that in partnership with our local, what's called a natural resource management group, which is called Terrain. So they've given us a 50-50 grant for that work as well. So our growers are paying for some of the soil tests and they're paying for the other. And then, as I said, we've been in discussions with a local Indigenous group, which is actually a big corporation here that represents 9 different traditional owner groups. And there's a very large amount on the table for that group. And then it's being leveraged by other funding partners. So that's kind of a whole separate process to what we're talking about here with the crowdfunding side of things. And that will really move this Indigenous group into a whole new pathway of economic independence, whereas at the moment they're completely reliant on grants for all their ranger programs, which is their main source of funding, but they also have an art centre, and so they're really looking for opportunities to be financially independent and to participating in the mainstream economy.
Yeah, wow. And it sounds like there's many layers to this business in terms of the work that you're doing, not only in terms of producing fruit and selling product, but as you say, those other aspects of the business that rely on the grant funding there. Questions come through about the contributions of this crowdfund and basically what investors can expect. I can answer this question from part, but the question is, will contributions in this crowdfunding buy shares in the company? Therefore, do we have some sort of expectation of dividend returns on the funds invested once the plantings mature and the business reflects returns on this investment? What sort of time frame are we looking at? Is that 3 to 4 years or is that longer? Now I can partially answer this question and then I might throw it over to the Rainforest Bounty team. So every investor that invests in a Birchal crowdsourced funding campaign will receive fully owned ordinary shares in the company that they're investing into. So the shares in the same company as the founders of the company, and you'll learn more about that in the offer document and the rights associated with those shares. Because we operate under the asset guidelines, as I mentioned before, we can't provide any speculative or what could be seen as misleading information to potential investors because it is a retail round, and that includes things like ROIs, time frame to return on investments and anything like that, because early stage companies can't guarantee those returns will happen. As one company pointed out once, it's like planting an avocado tree. Hopefully in 10 years' time it will bear fruit, but anything could kill that tree, in that 10 years' time. However, although we can't give you specific numbers or ranges on dividends, return on investment or things like that, I might pass it over to the Rainforest Bounty team. as your company grows into the future, is it your hope and your goal to consider paying dividends? Do you hope potentially one day to sell it to a bigger company? Do you plan to take the company even bigger? What are your initial thoughts on exit opportunities? Being fully aware that you can't guarantee those opportunities will occur.
So to try and answer this as delicately as possible. So what we aim to do, the business is structured in really two ways. One as an ingredient supplier, and the other as a value-added product. So we would like to, when the time is right, is to either sell the business as a whole, or to divide that business and sell one side to an ingredient business and the other, and spin off the brands. In terms of that, that would, in terms of sort of expectations for anything else, we would also very much like to, before that point, pay dividends to investors. But just for example, it takes about 5 years for a tree to fully mature to the point where any kind of expected yield comes from. So what we've done any of our previous projections of is at a 5-year period. So up until that point, the business is still sort of investing in itself and growing, going through a period of growth.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is that these trees are an orchard, and I think there's often some confusion about native species and this is why the industry has failed in the past, that you just put them in and sit on the veranda and drink a Chardonnay and they'll look after themselves, and that isn't the case. You actually need to be managing the orchards like you would an avocado orchard, but it's actually even there's less inputs, but it's a bit more tricky because you've got these multi-species that are there, and the science is showing us actually the more species the better. So we're constantly looking at new opportunities and other species that we might be able to incorporate within the framework of our existing orchards. For example, we have one customer that's really interested in native ginger and wants to develop a product with native ginger. So we're looking at the moment how we can incorporate native ginger within the rows of our existing orchard. We've got a bunch of other species that we're looking at as well. So constantly over time we'll be tweaking those orchard designs and looking to return as much investment back from those orchards as possible. And as Eddie said, and our goal is to be able to pay dividends as soon as possible, but it's realistically like to be 5 or 6 years before we can do that.
Before we can start exploring that, then of course. I'm interested to know, in terms of the amount of capital that Rainforest Bounty is looking to raise. Now, you've got some fantastic plans for the future of the company, and obviously with different sources, with different amounts of funding, you'll be able to achieve different levels of your next steps for growth. So I'd be really interested to know, in this crowdfunding campaign, what is the absolute minimum amount Rainforest Bounty is looking to raise to proceed forward with some of your expansion plans? What is the ideal amount that you're looking to raise, and what would be just incredible to raise if you've got that information? But if not, I'm sure we'll see it in the offer document.
Yeah, so the minimum amount of what we are aiming to raise is $150,000, and that allows us to plant orchards as a priority and a little bit of product development, a little bit of sales and marketing. And what would be a really great sweet spot would be around $750,000, because that gets us orchards, infrastructure, product development, and really puts us on that pathway of growth much sooner. And then the $1.5 million is pretty much everything we'll ever need to raise, and that'll get us to a 5-year mark where we have got sufficient capital, we have got everything we need, and that we're able to really start turning our focus onto the product side of things within that 5 years to try and balance out the revenue.
Yeah, fantastic. A question's come through from, I believe, is a potential investor that might be interested to invest as a company. Their question is, if our company invests, will we get priority of supply of raw materials?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. There's really one fruit product that has basically been bought for the next 10 years, but everything else we're still finding channels for. So ideally we have other businesses who are relying on us to grow, to support them and for their own growth. So yeah, absolutely. We're very happy to have partnerships in that kind of regard.
Yeah, and also, like we said before, if there's a particular ingredient that that company is looking for, we're also really happy to do, that's our background, is the research and development, to work out how we can commercialize that within our thing is it has to be a regenerative farming system. So that's a thing we won't budge on, but we're looking at ways how we can do that. And the existing grower network we have, they're the kind of people that are really excited by that innovation as well. So, that we're really open to those discussions.
Yeah, fantastic. Can you give us any sneak peeks into any products you've got cooking away under the hood that are due to be released, or is that all classified information for the audience?
No, something I'm really excited by the Bunji tamarind. And literally up until 2 years ago, there wasn't a reliable supply because, as I said, in the wild, it only fruits every 7 years. And even with our own orchards, they tended to have a big fruiting 1 year and not a very good one the next year. But now with our grower network coming on, we have this fantastic reliable supply. So I've got this whole bank of recipes that I've been playing with over the years that I'm starting to roll out. And one of them, and they're all looking at this plant-based recipes, because as Eddie said, that's the real trend. And we find that people that are interested in plant-based products have similar values to us and appreciate the work we do. So the one that we've actually been trialling at local markets and is in our retail shop is a plant-based pad thai tamarind sauce, which is absolutely awesome, I have to say. And I'm very biased, of course, but it is really great and it's going really well, getting really good feedback.
Yeah, and then another plant that we have in development is the Atherton raspberry. So the Atherton raspberry is one of 4 native raspberries in Australia. It's quite a good fruiter, but the fruit itself is probably a little bland and has a lot of seeds in it. So we actually now have a natural variant, which is sweeter and juicier of the Atherton raspberry. So there's a few more little stages of development into that, but then we will have what we believe to be a really, really good version of the native raspberry, the Atherton raspberry, out on the market as well.
Sounds fantastic. I think if you guys are planning to have a product tasting tester team, and some of the investors coming through this crowdfunding round, I'll sign up. And if you have to send me a sample to taste some, so a lot of these fruits I've never ever heard of. So it's just such an exciting space of just totally fantastic native fruits that have been around for absolute eons, and bringing it into the mainstream. I wish you guys all the very best with it. Which probably brings us to a nice conclusion of today's webinar. So if no one's got any further questions, Rainforest Bounty team, thank you so much again for your time today. I'll pass it over to you guys to wrap up in a sec. Just for everyone attending, the Expression of Interest campaign is open until Monday, I believe. So if you haven't yet expressed your interest, or someone who would be interested and would like to get on that investor waitlist to be the first to see when the offer terms go live and be some of the first to invest in this opportunity, then please head to the Birchal site, find the Rainforest Bounty profile and express your interest. You'll be able to connect with the Rainforest Bounty team. We'll be sending around an email afterwards with any questions you might have for me and Birchal, any questions you might have for their team, because I know they're very, very keen to have a chat to anyone that wants to join them on the opportunity. But guys, it's been really fantastic having you here today. Thank you so much for your time, the time of everyone that's attended. I might pass it over to you to wrap up.
Yeah, thank you very much, Claire, and thank you very much everyone for coming today. I really appreciated the questions. Look, if you have any other questions or any comments, please feel free to give us a call, drop us an email. Really happy to hear from you. And yeah, just super appreciative that you believed enough in our business to come this far. So yeah, very, very much thank you.
Yeah, and a big thank you from me. And also, I know I saw some of the names coming through. Some of you are already our customers. So I really appreciate, especially those of you in lockdown, buying our beautiful products and cheering up your lives. So yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for your time today.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a wonderful lunchtime and a great Wednesday.
See ya.